of hope and glory, mother of the free, how shall we extol thee, who are born of thee? Wider still and wider shall thy bounds be set. God, who made thee mighty, make thee mightier yet. Well, I first came face to face with the British Empire in 1964, certainly its aftermath, when I arrived at Wolverhampton College of Art in October, and there were posters up everywhere saying, if you want a nigger for a neighbour, vote Liberal or Labour. And the Conservative Party didn't disown them. They said, well, this is how people are feeling, and this sort of thing. It caused an enormous row, particularly when the MP was elected for Smelly. But I remember sitting in a pub with a friend of mine who had been much older than me, had been in the Royal Navy during the war. And I said to him, why are these people complaining? He said, well, they don't like all these coloured people coming in. So I said, but didn't we go and live with these people ourselves beforehand? We can't really turn around and now complain that they come to live with us, can we? And he said, well, you've got a point there, but that's not how it's seen, you see, because a lot of people don't know about the aftermath of empire. And I said, well, why not? He says, well, it's not sort of stressed now, you see, nobody talks about it. And he said, only since, this is 1964, well, it was still collapsing at that time. There were still countries being given their independence and things like that. But, I remember it when it was in its, in 1950s when we had to salute the flag on Empire Day and all that, which all disappeared after the Suez debacle, and somehow that was dropped and we didn't have to do that anymore. But it made me think about us going to live with them rather than them coming to live with us. But it wasn't until 1991 when I decided to go and take a look for myself. And what I thought I'd do is go and look at some of the British or Anglo-Saxon or WASP or whatever you want to call graveyards in some of these places we were complaining about. And one of the first places I went to, and it's one of my favourite pieces of work, was a piece I called Tales from the South China Sea. And here I found the gravestones of the oldest British Protestant cemetery in East Asia, which is in Macau. It was built before Hong Kong was built, and so Protestant English people had to be buried here. And it's got a fascinating range of people who were buried here. They talk about some of them were killed by dastardly Chinese, for example. But there's somebody here, for example, John P. Williams, who actually invented he introduced the telegraph to Japan. It's an extraordinary idea that he did that, although he was from New York State, but we'll gloss over that. He was a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant anyway, so, what's the difference? At the top of this piece was photographed in Borneo or in Brunei, and it's a mangrove swamp. And I put that at the top because Tales from the South China Sea, Macau is on the north of the South China Sea, and of course Borneo and Brunei is on the south. And of course during the 19th century the South China Sea was a British lake for all intents and purposes. Now it's a contested lake between China and the United States. But it wasn't until a few years later I went to India, and I photographed an Indian cemetery, but again these were white people living in India who had died in India, and it's rather sad because there's some very fancy gravestones from the 18th and 19th century, but at the bottom were the graves of those people, white people who had stayed on in India, and their graves were very simple, just made of plaster, a bit of stone, a bit of brickwork. You can see rather put together in a very rudimentary but touching way, I thought, and in some ways much more touching than the others. This is in Agra, which is the site of the Taj Mahal, which you can see at the top there, probably the most beautiful monument in the world. But the round disc underneath was interesting. It was covered in sort of ivy and everything. I pulled it off, and it was there that I saw this. The grave of the man who saved the Taj Mahal. The Taj Mahal was in a terrible condition in the early 19th century, about to fall down. But this engineer, Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Taylor from the Bengal Engineers, actually it says that the Taj Mahal and Akbar's tomb were repaired and restored to beauty by this officer, which I thought was very touching. And it's true that not everything in the British Empire was bad. I mean, they did build roads and railways and reduce disease and stop people being burnt sooty widows being burnt and that sort of thing. And lots of good things were done, but nevertheless we were controlling a large part of the world and run for our own benefit. And it was something that made me think that you can't really, just say the British Empire was a bad thing or a good thing. It was a thing, and it affected the world in which we live today. Land of hope and glory, mother of the free, how shall we extol thee, who are born of thee? Wider still and wider shall thy bounds be set. God who made thee mighty, make thee mightier yet. God who made thee mighty, make thee mightier yet. My book, London Then and Now, about the capital of what was once the largest empire in the world, the time when I was alive still, has in it all the monuments then and now, the Tower Bridge and Buckingham Palace and the Towers of Parliament and all that. But at the end of it, I ended on a little postscript, and I found on the Mile End Road in a very run-down condition, in fact it wasn't there was just a little old car park there, it's overgrown with weeds, the home of Captain James Cook, who was the surveyor who surveyed the coasts of New Zealand and Australia and the Pacific Islands, which led to the establishment of those of colonies, white colonies, across that huge region of the world. And I thought it was very interesting because there's the photograph of the house as it once was on there. And there's a photograph of it, the remains of it now, it's gone. But on the left is a little Bangladeshi supermarket. And the two are connected, of course, because the location is where many current residents now demonstrate a positive outcome between Britain's empire of the past and the multicultural London of today.